The wind howled through the jagged peaks surrounding the kingdom, carrying whispers of old curses and forgotten prophecies. Deep in the heart of the forest, in a stone-walled chamber lit by flickering torches, Lyra held her newborn daughters close. Their tiny bodies trembled, wrapped in rough cloth as she whispered gentle words into the dark silence. She was an Omega, fragile in the eyes of the clan, and the world beyond her walls was merciless. Her heart ached. She had given life to 3 girls, a fate that, in the eyes of the Alpha Council, was a curse. Daughters, they said, carried doom, weakness, or shame. Even her husband had abandoned her when he realized the clan would punish her. Lyra's eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and unshed tears, looked down at the 3 tiny faces, each delicate and perfect. She refused to see them as cursed. They were her hope, her heart, and the world that had turned against her would not take them without a fight. The sound of heavy footsteps on stone echoed through the hall. Lyra's stomach tightened. She knew what was coming. The guards were here to enforce the council's decree. Her daughters whimpered softly, sensing the tension. She clutched them closer, her body shaking, not from cold but from fear. "You dare defy the law of the clan, Omega?" The voice was sharp, cruel, belonging to High Guard Malric, a man known for his cold heart. 3 daughters? 3 curses in one chamber? The Alpha Council will not forgive this. Lyra's lips trembled, but she found a spark of courage. "They are not cursed," she said, her voice weak but firm. "They are children. They are innocent." Malric laughed, a sound without warmth. "Innocent. The laws of the pact do not forgive innocence, Omega. You should have known." He raised a hand, and the first strike landed. Pain flared across her back, and she cried out, clutching the children protectively. The beating was swift and harsh. Malric showed no mercy, believing he was preserving the honor of the clan. Lyra's tears fell freely, dripping onto her daughter's blankets. But even in the pain, she refused to let despair rule her heart. "I will not let you take them," she whispered between breaths. "I will protect my daughters. I will survive." Just as the guards moved to take the children, a shadow fell across the chamber. A figure stepped into the torchlight, tall and commanding. Every eye turned, and a hush fell over the hall. It was Kale, the Alpha King. He moved with the silent authority of one who had seen war and ruled over death and life alike. His gaze swept over the room, lingering on Lyra and her trembling daughters. There was a storm in his eyes, a mixture of fury and something else, a strange curiosity. "Stop." His voice was low, yet it carried power that silenced the guards instantly. Malric faltered, caught in the gaze of a king who wielded both fear and justice. Kale approached Lyra slowly, his presence immense yet strangely gentle. He knelt slightly to look into her eyes. "Are these your children?" he asked, his tone carrying more wonder than judgment. Lyra nodded, still trembling.
"Yes, my daughters," she said softly.
"Please, they are only children. They have done nothing wrong." Kale's gaze swept the room again, and the council's guards shifted uncomfortably. The Alpha King rarely intervened in such matters. To see him stop a punishment was unheard of. "These girls are not cursed," Kyle said, his voice quiet but firm. "And neither are you, Omega. No child of mine or any child will be beaten for what nature has given them." Malric gritted his teeth but stepped back, bowing his head in silent obedience. The council would not be pleased, but Kale's command was absolute. Lyra blinked, unable to believe her ears. You would protect us?" she whispered. Kale nodded. "Yes, but you must understand the world outside is cruel. Protection is not safety. I can shield you here within my walls, but the old hatred will follow us. Are you prepared for that?" Lyra's heart raced. The fear she had carried for months battled with a flicker of hope. Could this powerful, mysterious Alpha truly change her fate? She had suffered so long under the weight of cruelty that hope almost seemed dangerous. But looking at Kale, standing there with a strange mix of strength and understanding, she realized something she had not felt in a long time. Perhaps there was a chance. I will try," she said quietly. "I will do whatever it takes to keep my daughters safe." Kale extended a hand, not just in authority but in a silent promise. "Then we begin anew. But understand this, Lyra. Nothing will be easy. You will have to trust me, and perhaps I will have to trust you." Lyra hesitated, her hand hovering over his. There was a tension in the air, a mixture of fear and curiosity, respect and longing. She placed her small hand in his, feeling the surprising warmth and strength that radiated from him. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Two souls meeting across pain and power, each seeing something the other rarely revealed. Kyle guided Lyra and her daughters to a small carriage. The city beyond the forest was alive with whispers, shadows of superstition and fear following them even now. As they rode, Lyra glanced at Kale. He did not speak much, but his presence was constant, protective, and somehow comforting. Why?
Why help me?
She asked finally, the words barely audible above the wheels creaking along the stone road. Kale's eyes softened, though they remained sharp. Because I have seen cruelty too long, and because you have something I do not often see, strength where others would see only weakness. That is a rare thing, Lyra. Lyra's heart skipped. Strength? Did he really see her that way after all she had suffered? She wanted to speak, to ask more, but the carriage jolted over a rough stone, and she held her daughters tighter, their warmth a small comfort against the cold reality of the world outside. When they arrived at Kale's fortress, the stone walls towered like sentinels over the valley. Torches lit the battlements and the wind whispered through the spires. Inside, the halls were vast, filled with shadows and echoes of power. Kale led them to a small suite, modest but safe, where her daughters could rest without fear of immediate harm. You will be safe here. For now, Kale said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to carry the weight of mountains. But the council will not forget easily, and the prophecy, it stirs in ways you may not yet understand. Lyra's brow furrowed. Prophecy, I do not understand. Kale paused, studying her. Neither did I once. But sometimes those we deem weakest hold the keys to the future. Your daughters may be such keys. Lyra's chest tightened. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had borne children in a cruel world, and now perhaps they were more than just children. They could change the very balance of power she had learned to fear. Night fell over the fortress, and Lyra sat beside her daughters, watching their tiny chests rise and fall in sleep. She felt a mixture of relief, fear, and something else, something she could not name, but it stirred warmly in her chest whenever Kale's presence lingered nearby. Outside her window, the wind carried whispers of old magic and long-forgotten kings. Inside, a fragile bond began to form, two lives touched by cruelty, slowly learning that even in the darkest world, there could be light. And in the shadow of the fortress, Kale stood silently, watching over them. The Alpha King, known for his ruthlessness, felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest, a protective impulse, a fierce care, and an undeniable fascination with the fragile Omega who dared to hope. He turned away from the window, but the thought of Lyra and her daughters lingered like a flame against the dark. The world is cruel, he whispered, but perhaps, together we can be stronger than it. The night deepened, carrying with it both promise and danger. Outside the walls, the council plotted. Old hatred simmered and the prophecy whispered on the wind. Lyra held her daughters close and whispered softly, "We will survive. We must." And somewhere in the fortress, Kale's gaze lingered on her, the weight of power and the pull of something deeper pressing upon him. Their paths had crossed in suffering, but fate had a way of weaving even the weakest threads into something mighty. The fortress walls stood tall against the night, yet even within them, danger lingered like a shadow that would not leave. Lyra sat by the fire in her small suite, her daughters sleeping peacefully in their cradle. She traced the soft curve of their tiny hands, feeling a surge of love that burned stronger than fear. The world outside might despise them, but inside these walls they were safe. But safety was fragile. Lyra could feel it in the air, the tension that lingered like smoke in the stone corridors. Kale moved silently through the halls, his presence a constant reassurance. He had become more than a protector. He had become a quiet pillar in her stormed life, a strength that she could rely upon even when the world seemed determined to crush her. "You are awake," Kale said, his voice low as he appeared in the doorway. His eyes, sharp as a wolf's, softened when they met hers. "I cannot sleep," Lyra admitted. "I keep thinking about what will happen if the council comes for us. If they discover the girl's secret." Kyle stepped closer, the weight of his presence both frightening and comforting. "The council fears what they cannot control," he said. "And your daughters are not ordinary. There is power in them that I have seen only once in centuries. It is why I protected you, Lyra, and why I will continue to do so." Lyra shivered, not from cold but from the intensity of his words. "Power in them?" she whispered. "I do not understand." Kyle's expression darkened, a storm behind his eyes. It is ancient, tied to prophecy. They may unify the clans or destroy them. That is why some fear them. But I see what you cannot. They are not a curse. They are hope. And hope must be protected. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had lived in fear her entire life, believing that her daughter's existence was shameful. Now the Alpha King of the land, a man known for his ruthlessness, saw them as a gift, and in his gaze she felt a strange mixture of awe and something more. A warmth that made her pulse quicken. The days that followed were tense but quietly beautiful. Kale ensured the fortress remained vigilant, but he also allowed Lyra moments of peace. Together they walked the hidden gardens, where mist curled around twisted trees and petals glimmered in the moonlight. "You are braver than you think," Kale said one night as they watched the mist swirl around the stone paths. "You have survived what no one else could, and yet you still care for them. Your daughters, even when the world has shown you cruelty." Lyra lowered her gaze, brushing her fingers against the soft fur of one daughter sleeping in her arms. "I must care for them," she whispered. "They are all I have, and perhaps they are all I have left to hope for." Kyle studied her silently. He had faced countless battles, commanded legions, and ruled with iron. Yet here, with Lyra, he felt an unfamiliar pull. She was not just fragile. She was resilient. She had endured, and yet her spirit remained unbroken. He felt an urge to protect her, not because of duty, but because something deep inside him demanded it. Their bond grew in quiet moments, shared glances, unspoken words, and nights spent speaking softly of dreams and fears. Lyra slowly began to trust him, though the wounds of the past were not easily healed. And Kale, for the first time in his long rule, found himself vulnerable to someone else's presence, a feeling he had long thought impossible. But peace, as it always does, was temporary. One evening, the council moved. Shadows crept beneath the fortress gates and whispers carried of rebellion and vengeance. Kale had expected it. He had anticipated that the old hatred would not rest, but what he had not expected was the fire that would ignite within Lyra. "The council will come," Kale warned, his jaw tight as he stood beside her in the main hall. "They believe the girls are a threat. They will try to take them." Lyra's eyes, once filled with fear, burned with determination. "They will not take them," she said, her voice stronger than he had ever heard. "I will protect them. I will not be afraid anymore." Kyle's gaze softened. He saw her courage, raw and unrefined, yet real. It was one thing to command armies, another to face fear with nothing but your own heart and the love for those you could not abandon. He felt pride and something deeper stir within him. The attack came at dawn. Shadows of the council's forces scaled the outer walls, their intent clear. Kyle moved with deadly precision, his power a storm of controlled fury, but Lyra did not hide. She took her daughters in her arms and stepped forward, placing herself in the line of danger. "You will not touch them," she said, her voice steady. "They are my children, and I will not let anyone harm them." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The attackers, taken aback by her courage, faltered. Kale's eyes met hers and he nodded, silent communication passing between them. Together they were a force the council had not expected, an Alpha and an Omega united, not just by circumstance but by trust and something more subtle, a bond that had begun to grow in the quiet moments of fear and hope. The clash was fierce but swift. Kale's strength, combined with Lyra's courage, repelled the council's forces. When the dust settled, the attackers retreated, leaving the fortress unbroken. Kale turned to Lyra, whose hair was tousled, cheeks flushed with adrenaline, but whose eyes shone with triumph. "You have strength beyond what you know," Kale said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And not just for yourself, for them. For your daughters." Lyra met his gaze, her heart pounding, not just from the battle, but from the nearness of him, from the realization that he had seen her, truly seen her, in all her fear and courage. "I do not know if I am brave," she whispered, "but I know I cannot let them suffer." Kale's hand found hers, warm and strong. "Then we are alike," he said. "I do not allow suffering either, and neither will I allow your daughter's future to be stolen." The storm outside had passed, but the prophecy still whispered. Lyra's daughters stirred in their cradle, tiny hands reaching out as if sensing the protection and hope surrounding them. Kale knelt beside the cradle, his eyes softening as he looked at the girls who carried the weight of the kingdom in ways they could not yet understand. They are remarkable, Kyle murmured, more to himself than anyone else. And they are yours. Always yours. Lyra felt a warmth she had never known before. Here, in the heart of the fortress, with the Alpha King beside her and her daughters safe, she realized that her life was no longer only defined by fear and cruelty. It was also defined by love, courage, and the bond she had begun to share with Kale. Night fell over the fortress once more, and in the quiet, Lyra finally allowed herself to rest. Kale stood watch by the window, eyes scanning the horizon, ever vigilant. But inside, a quiet smile touched his lips. In the fragile Omega and her children, he had seen the spark that could light a kingdom. And in that spark, he had found something he did not know he had been seeking, a reason to hope, a reason to protect, and a reason to care in a way that went beyond duty. The wind whispered again through the towers, carrying with it shadows of prophecy and the distant murmurs of the council's plans. But for the first time, Lyra did not tremble. She held her daughters close, feeling their tiny hearts beating against hers, and somewhere deep in her soul she felt the beginnings of a promise, not just to survive, but to thrive and perhaps to love. Kale joined her, placing a protective hand over hers as they watched the stars above. "The night is dark," he said, "but together, we can face it." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of the past lift, if only a little. "Together," she whispered. And so within the fortress of shadows and strength, two hearts once isolated by fear and cruelty began to beat in rhythm, not just for survival, but for a future filled with courage, hope, and the quiet promise of love. Yet beyond the walls the council still whispered, the prophecy still stirred, and the night waited, holding its secrets, ready to test the bonds forged in fire and courage. Lyra closed her eyes, clutching her daughters, and whispered into the dark, "We are not afraid." Kyle's hand remained on hers, warm and steady, a silent vow echoing between them. They would face whatever came together. End of Part 2. Cliffhanger. Though the council had retreated, their shadows still lingered, and the prophecy whispered of trials yet to come. Lyra and Kale's bond had grown, but the fate of the daughters and the kingdom remained uncertain, promising more challenges ahead.